Why do billionaires fund anti-trans and anti-black history political movements? It's a reasonable question, right? I mean, what's in it for them? There's a popular meme going around the internet right now that says, and I quote, "Say you're in a room with 400 people. 36 of them don't have health insurance, 48 of them live in poverty, 85 are illiterate, 90 have untreated mental illness, and every day at least one person is shot. But 2 of them are trans, so you decide ruining their lives is your top priority." End of quote. This is America, right? And this is your GOP, actually. Right now, almost 30 million Americans lack health insurance altogether, and 43% of Americans are so badly uninsured that any illness or accident that costs them more than $1,000 will wipe them out. Almost 12% of Americans, over 37% of us, live in dire poverty. 12%. Only 5% of Italians work at low-wage jobs, and those Italians who work at low-wage jobs, they have free health care and free college. More than 1 in 5 Americans, 21%, are illiterate. By 4th grade, a mere 35% of American children are literate at grade level as a result of a 2-decade-long attack by Republicans at both state and federal levels on our public schools. Fully a quarter of Americans, 26%, suffer from a diagnosable mental illness in any given year. Over half of them, 54%, never get treatment. And because of a cost and lack of access, of the 46% who do get treatment, the average time from onset of symptoms to the first treatment is 11 years. Every day in America, 316 people are shot and 110 die from their wounds. Gun violence is now the leading cause of death in the United States. Not anywhere else in the world, but in the United States. And these are just the tip of the iceberg statistics about how Americans suffer from Reagan's, basically war on working people. We spend twice as much on health care as any other country in the world. We spend about $11,900 per person. In Australia, it's $5,400. In Japan, it's $4,600. It's $5,400 in France. It's $7,300 in Germany, which is the most expensive fully developed country in the world outside of the United States. And we don't get better health or longer lifespan. The average American life expectancy is 78 years. In Canada, it's 82. Australia, 82. Japan, 84. France, 83. Are public schools a mess? So given all these statistics and all these facts that I just shared with you, why is it that Republicans across the nation insist that the country's most severe problems are teaching black history and trans kids wanting to be recognized for who they are? Now, if you give it a moment of thought, I would suggest to you that the reason Republicans have decided that these 2 things are far more important than any of the other things I just mentioned is because we have a billionaire problem and a bribery problem. The most visible feature of the Reagan Revolution was when Reagan dropped the top income tax bracket for billionaires, for really morbidly rich people, from 74% down to 25% and then up to 27% a year later. And then he and subsequent Republicans shot the IRS tax code so full of loopholes that today the average American billionaire pays 3.4% income tax. And some, like Donald Trump, pay nothing for years, for decades. Donald Trump never paid more than $1,000 in income taxes per year for almost 20 years. So who are these people? And why are they funding activist groups that are trashing trans people and black people and black history? The hypothesis that I'm putting forward, and this is the only part of what I'm presenting to you in this block that is hypothetical, is that there is a small percentage of these billionaires. We have about 1,000 billionaires, about 800 billionaires in the United States. And the problematic ones, the ones who are funding this kind of stuff, that's a couple dozen people. And I'm hypothesizing that couple dozen, maybe as many as 100, but I think it's fewer than that, of the billionaires that we have, are actually afflicted with the hoarding syndrome variant of obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. These are people who, if they had not been born into a wealthy family, or if they hadn't gotten a lucky break and ended up a billionaire, they would be living in an apartment where the newspapers and tin cans would be floor to ceiling, and there'd be, you know, they would be showing up on that TV show about hoarders. Because that's what they're doing. They're hoarding. It's just that they're hoarding money, they're hoarding yachts, they're hoarding mansions around the world, they're hoarding servants, they're hoarding, you know, money bins worthy of Scrooge McDuck. And that in and of itself wouldn't be a problem. I mean, you know, it causes inequality. We've become the most unequal society in the world, but in the developed world. But that in and of itself wouldn't be a problem if it wasn't that some of those billionaires decided to fund Clarence Thomas's lifestyle and Anthony Scalia's lifestyle, and John Roberts' wife's lifestyle to the tune of $10 million. And now, and then those three people who were being spiffed by the billionaires on the Supreme Court ruled in 2010 with Citizens United that money isn't money anymore. Money is free speech. So if a billionaire wants to pour money down the throat of a politician in exchange for more tax breaks, that's just free speech. It's protected by the First Amendment, you know. And also, if a corporation wants to buy a politician, or 10 politicians, or 100 politicians, or even a Supreme Court justice, that's free speech too, because corporations are people, don't you know, or persons. And therefore, they're entitled to all those human rights that our founders fought and died for, and enshrined in the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. In the 42 years since the start of the Reagan Revolution, bought-off politicians have so altered our tax code that $51 trillion has left the pockets, the homes, the bank accounts, and the retirement accounts of working-class Americans and ended up in the money bins of the morbidly rich. $51 trillion. Which is why we are the most unequal developed nation in the world, by a huge margin. And the price of all this, of giving the billionaires all that money that they used to pay in taxes, letting them keep all that money, in addition to inequality, is that our roads are a mess, our schools are a mess. Well, you know, I went through the list at the very beginning. Now, there are, and that the entire GOP has got their hand out now that the Supreme Court legalized bribing politicians and Supreme Court justices. You know, with Citizens United, they legalized their own bribery too. Now, so basically this is the entire GOP has got their hand out. There are some Democrats who do too, Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, and the Democrats in Congress who call themselves the corporate problem solvers, which is their way of saying, yeah, you can bribe us. Just, you know, cross my palm with cash and I'll write the legislation for you. But the majority of the Democratic Party is not on board with this, and that's why Nancy Pelosi was able to get the For the People Act through the House of Representatives a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, and it passed. And the For the People Act would have provided for publicly funded elections. It would have limited big money in politics. It would have restored our political bribery laws. It would have ended many of the Republican Party's favorite voter suppression tactics. All of which, but you know, it got filibustered by the Republicans, and Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema refused to go along with breaking the filibuster, which, in my opinion, was a major crime against democracy. So all of this then brings us back around to that meme that I opened this rant with. You know, imagine there's 400 people in a room, et cetera. Why are right-wing billionaires funding activist groups and politicians who are trying to end the teaching of black history and make the lives of trans people miserable? You think about it for a minute. Look at the headlines in the news. The answer becomes apparent. As long as we're all fighting with each other over gender or black history, the hoarding syndrome billionaires and their corporations are free to continue pillaging America and ripping off working families and working people. It's just that simple. It's the classic divide and conquer strategy that Marcus Aurelius wrote about 2,000 years ago. It's 16 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back.